All right, Cherubs, I've been asked by quite a few people to have a look at this little film here by Peter Attia, which is called What Does the Science Tell Us About the Carnivore Diet? Well, I can preempt a bit. If we mean what does the science tell us about hard health outcomes in human beings over any period of time, about any aspect of human diet whatsoever, the answer is nothing. Nothing at all is what the science tells us about that. But let's see what the context is, what Peter has to say, and let's put it right where it's wrong, which I suspect, as usual, with Peter Attia, is going to be pretty much everywhere. Off you go, Peter, and guest Stephan Guyenet.
I wanted to talk about the carnivore diet with you a little bit because I know you guys did a review on a book. It's not a diet I've spent any time really thinking about.
So why would you then make a video where you make comments about it, Peter? That would seem fairly ridiculous, wouldn't it?
So I've basically spoken to, I don't know, a dozen people who have gone on it, and without exception, they all lose weight. Which I think for some of them is their motivation for doing it. And it must simply be that they just get tired of eating, right? They just don't.
Absolute rubbish, Peter. Absolute garbage. I love my food. I really enjoy food, more than I've ever done in my life. In fact, I am not tired of eating. Neither am I on a carnivore diet to lose weight, because as you can probably see, I don't really have very much to lose, actually. 5'6" and about 145 pounds dripping wet. And that's how it was before I went on the carnivore diet too. Many people, in fact, go on a carnivore diet to help with all sorts of issues, including autoimmune dysfunctions variously. Some for weight loss, absolutely. Some for digestive disorders of myriad kind. There are many, many reasons why people go to a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, that being carnivore, not just weight loss. Basically, you are confirming with your mindless, vacuous commentary here, Peter, what you yourself have just said, which is that you haven't even thought about this. So, again, why would you comment on it at all?
They just can't take in the number of calories. If they're
Okay, calories cannot be taken in, Peter. It is a physical impossibility. You cannot consume calories. Calories are a measurement of heat energy, manifest as photons, an excitation of the electromagnetic field. These do not interact with the Higgs field, ergo cannot be brought to rest in any inertial frame ever, under any circumstances. So you don't even have first principles correct, Peter. And actually, if you do a calculation on the proposed so-called intake of so-called calories, a falsehood, but nonetheless, if you did it using the classic methodology by which this is attempted, what you will find is that carnivore folks eat as many or not more purportedly as others, in fact. So wrong again is what I'm saying.
they're doing it in that format.
I think there's probably, so I would say that, we don't have any good data on the impact of carnivore diet on weight. So, there's...
Or anything else, or any other aspect of diet on any hard health outcome of any kind, in fact. Who is this clown anyway?
No randomized controlled trials, but, we have these anecdotes of people saying they lose a lot of weight. I certainly don't dispute that. But I think if you came to me with this diet on paper and you asked me, would this cause weight? I would say absolutely, because it has multiple properties that I would expect to make it a particularly effective weight loss diet. One, this is something we could talk about more if you want, but it has zero carbohydrate. So
No, it doesn't, Stephan. That's false. Absolutely false. Completely false.
So I think that anywhere, if you're on the extreme of the fat to carbohydrate ratio, in either direction, that's more slimming than being in the middle.
Yes. Good.
So the most fattening diets are rich in both carbohydrate and fat. So there's zero carbohydrate. You're on the extreme.
No, it's still false.
Or I shouldn't say zero. Very, very low.
There you go. But you have said it twice.
Right.
So you're
outside
on
of the glycogen in the meat. That's
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
There's a little glycogen. So you're on the very extreme end of the macronutrient distribution. It's high in protein. That's also
It depends.
known to contribute to weight loss. You're eliminating almost every type of food. So the variety of your diet goes very low. I mean, you can prepare your
So what?
meat in different ways. You can eat chicken or fish or beef or whatever, but the variety is greatly, greatly reduced. So that's, I think, part of it. And you're cutting out all of these highly processed, calorie-dense foods.
No, again with the calories nonsense. No. Absolutely not. False.
That are the foods that I think, we could debate about the why, but I think everyone agrees that those are foods that drive excess intake and elevated body fatness. So I think all these things together.
What foods are? You're very, very unclear there, Stephan, as to the message. What foods are you claiming drive excessive intakes?
It's just, even on paper, it's a diet that I would very much expect to cause weight loss to a greater degree than your average diet.
And while we're on the topic, tell me a little bit about your review of this, because I know you've put some time into this. And for folks that are wondering, I don't really plan to do a podcast on the carnivore diet.
What are you doing right now then, Peter?
I doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
But you haven't even thought about it, and you have no idea what it's even about, Peter, still. So your commentary is entirely inappropriate.
Although I don't dispute that there are people who I think have had very successful outcomes on it with respect to
all sorts of things, in fact.
Dealing with some of their physical ailments. So maybe it has a role in sort of overcoming some acute...
It is the species-appropriate, species-specific diet for a human being, demonstrably. It is the diet that we evolved consuming, the carnivore diet. It is the one that is best conduced to our best likelihoods of the best health span and lifespan. It is the most propitious diet available to a human. These are the facts, whether Peter Attia likes those facts or whether he doesn't.
Illness. And maybe I'm just biased towards thinking plants are valuable.
Well, that's just an opinion, Peter. Opinions are just like assholes, aren't they, though? Almost everybody has one, and it's almost certainly full of shit. And your opinions, Peter, on many topics are indeed absolutely ram-packed full of shit. Nonsense. Your ideas on heart disease, absolute fucking nonsense from the ground up. Wrong. Your ideas about plants being a valid part of the human nutritional intakes. Wrong. I could go on all day, but I'll leave the going on all day to you and your guest, Stephan, whoever he is.
But I guess it seems to me that one of the core tenets of the diet is that plants are sort of low grade toxic, right? I mean, isn't that sort of part of the thesis?
Well, it depends from plant to plant, Peter, as to the grade of toxicity that they produce, provide, for want of a better term, cause. Some plants will kill you outright and immediately. Other plants will kill you slowly over decades. But they all contain toxins that will do the job at some point.
Yeah, the thesis is basically everything is toxic except grass-fed animal foods.
Folks, no, that's not the thesis at all. That's just absolute rubbish. That's a pathetic, ridiculous straw man.
So like even tap water is considered not optimal.
Well, show me some tap water that is optimal, you absolute buffoon. For goodness sake.
But yeah, so the book spends a lot of time like going through the litany of all the potentially harmful compounds in plant foods. And actually, you know what? I sympathize with some of this. I think there is a bias toward thinking if it's in a plant, it's healthy. And I don't think that's true. I think the book is right that's not necessarily true. And I think there are some plant compounds that, at least for some people, are not so good. And, there are well characterized examples of this. Like if you eat a lot of spinach, you can get kidney stones from all the oxalate. There are studies suggesting that the glucosinolates in cabbage family plants might contribute to type 2 diabetes. There's like kidney beans. If you don't cook them enough, they can be really toxic because of the lectins. So it's not like there aren't examples of this. It's definitely true that to some degree. I think it just gets taken far beyond where the evidence is. And,
there is no good, robust scientific evidence of hard health outcomes in human beings over any period of time under adequate control and observation as that relates to any aspect of any dietary intervention of any kind available anywhere in the world. So the statement is correct, but it's partial information. The implication is that there is good nutrition science for humans out there. That's false. There isn't. Sorry about that. Just the facts.
The way to think about how healthy a food is not to say, does it contain toxins? It's to say, what's the cost-benefit analysis on this food? And most importantly, what are the empirical outcomes that we can see when its impacts on health are directly studied?
There are no studies that do that, because studies of impacts on health, a cause and effect inference, Stephan, would require adequate control, adequate observation over an extended period of time under laboratory lock-in situation. That cannot be done. It cannot be done practically, it cannot be done financially, and it cannot be done ethically. You cannot experiment on human beings. Stop implying that human nutrition science exists. It doesn't. Still.
So, this is something that I've kind of focused on in my evaluation of some of the ideas that are put forth in the public sphere, is that a lot of people who are coming out with, let's say, unusual ideas in this sphere,
do you have any ideas that are going to come out anytime soon, or are you just going to say, What are the thoughts you're trying to get across here? Perhaps you should have had them written down before.
They take a mechanism and they run with it.
Well, that's because there's no science, sunshine.
X toxin is really bad, like lectins, for example, Gundry. Lectins can do XYZ, lectins are in plants, therefore we shouldn't eat these types of plants.
Gundry is a card-carrying vegan, Stephan. So if anybody has an axe to grind to suggest that lectins are not a problem, it would be Gundry, wouldn't it? Nonetheless, he is saying they can be a problem, and he's right in that regard. In many other regards, on many other things he has to say on many other topics, he's not, of course. That's a very common situation here on the interwebs, where almost everybody is wrong almost all the time, actually. But at the end of the day, as regards lectins, Gundry is correct. Absolutely correct in what he has to say about them.
And that's really like a bottom-up approach, like extrapolating empirical effects on health from mechanism, when really, I think in a complex field like nutrition, it's better to start with the empirical evidence, like, oh, we have this study that suggests that there's actually an effect on health. Let's see if we can understand the mechanism.
Effect is the conjugate of what, boys and girls? Oh, yes. Cause. Isn't it, Stephan? Cause and effect is determined experimentally using interventional science under adequate control, observation, etc., to delimit the outcomes, to eliminate confounds, covariates, collinearities, etc., or a statement about cause and effect is entirely inappropriate. And you're making statements about cause and effect implying that they exist. They are not extant in the literature, Stephan. There are none. No experiments exist to support any such claim. Of course, mechanistic speculation is required precisely for that reason. Because there is no cause and effect science which can support a claim one way or the other as it relates to any aspect of health outcome in humans over any period of time, as it relates to any nutritional intervention of any kind still.
Stretching will not make you flexible and it will not eliminate your recurring injuries. Stretching will relax your muscles and...
What are some of the biochemical changes that occur in people on a carnivore diet?
Right, so mechanistic speculations now. The very thing that Stephan is suggesting is not optimal, because what he's implying is that epididly-doodly-moodly-mology is the better science. No, it isn't. Still, it's not science. It's not even related to science. It's not even closely akin to science. It's anti-science, if anything, is nutritional epididly-doodly-mology.
I mean, the obvious one must be the dyslipidemia, right?
There is no such thing, in fact, Peter. Dyslipidemia is a medical term. It is a fabricated term. It is a term used to pathologize what is, in fact, an entirely normal physiological state of being. You ignorant, arrogant imbecile.
Yes.
No. False, Stephan. You absolute clown show.
So, there's a shift toward a ketogenic...
I've heard this guy's name before, Stephan Guyenet. I've got no idea who he is. It is clear that he's got no idea, just from what he said here.
Metabolism, because of the fact that it's very low carbohydrate. I
thought it was zero. Remember?
Be an obvious shift that occurs. I don't know if I'd use the term dyslipidemia, but
I wouldn't. It doesn't exist.
One of the potential downsides I focused on in the review that is downplayed by many carnivore diet advocates, including Paul Saladino.
Paul Saladino is not a carnivore diet advocate, you absolute cockmuncher. He's nothing of the sort. He's not even closely akin to a carnivore. He's an imbecile, a buffoon, and a criminally negligent, homicidal idiot in terms of the advice he's giving.
Is the change in LDL cholesterol. And
LDL is not cholesterol, you ignorant, arrogant man-child. LDL cholesterol does not exist. There is no such thing.
LDL particle count. So, and again, we don't have great evidence here, and this is kind of the crux of our review of the book on Red Pen Reviews, is simply that there are a lot of claims made that are not supported by any kind of convincing evidence.
Right. So what we have is a bunch of people with opinions. That's why this discussion continues ad infinitum, isn't it, kiddies? Because, once again, they're just like assholes, aren't they, opinions?
But we have some evidence. So there's this...
No, we don't. False, again.
Survey study that was done.
A survey study. And you're going to say evidence and then suffix that immediately with survey study as an example of evidence? You absolute fucking imbecile. No.
On something like 2,000 carnivore dieters. I think David Ludwig was involved in that. And they just reached out to people in social media groups, like their Facebook groups and things. And they administered this survey.
So? That's not a lot worse than what's done in any other field of so-called nutritional, so-called hippily-diddly-doodly-moodly-mology. It's all respondent data-based. They ask questions of people and they write down what people say and they believe them. And then they do an analysis on what people said, and then they change the numbers entirely in a completely arbitrary fashion based around a thing called multiple variate regression, which is for another day altogether. But basically what they do is they then fabricate the outcomes of their surveys to suggest that people said what they didn't even say. And now you're going to tell us that this is evidence, and it's better evidence than reasonable mechanistic speculation. Well, your credibility is absolutely in the toilet here, sunshine, isn't it? Minus several billion points to you, whoever the rip-roaring purple fuck you are.
And one of the questions was, what was your various blood lipid values before and after this diet?
And who cares? So what?
And you see that there are changes in positive and negative directions.
So what? And how would you define positive and negative as regards lipids? Your blood lipids are almost entirely under the control, the arbitrary control of your gene set. Those genes reacting to the environment in which you place them at any given time to best conduce the best outcome possible. Those genes being the absolute peak of evolution throughout the entire evolutionary process to this point, those genes knowing exactly what they're doing at large. Sure, there are people with faulty gene sets, individual people here and there, a number of those around the world. My comments, of course, are aimed at the middle of the bell-shaped curve. So the normal human gene set absolutely knows exactly what it's doing as regards the setting and homeostatic maintenance of all sorts of things, including all of the blood lipids. The levels are exactly what they ought to be at that time. Good. What's next?
Triglycerides go down as you would expect.
Triglycerides going down is not necessarily good. Like everything, the level of triglycerides has an optimal value. It's an inverted U-shaped curve, like, well, almost every biological signal possible, actually.
I don't remember what HDL did, but it probably went up. Yeah. And then there was a large increase in LDL cholesterol.
LDL is still not cholesterol, Stephan. And who cares? So what? That's what the gene set decided should occur on the basis of the diet at that time. And a bunch of other things, not just the diet. And the outcome is the one that's best conduced to the best possible outcomes. It's the most propitious thing to do. The genes have a lot of experience in sorting through this and making those decisions without the input from people like yourself, Stephan, who clearly haven't got the first fucking clue of what they're talking about, in fact.
And so that's a concern.
No, it isn't. Not at all. False.
You know, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, your opinion on this is just that. It's your opinion. And it's a vacuous, ignorant, ill-trained, and ill-conceived opinion.
I think you would agree. And
well, Peter would agree, because his opinion is similarly arrogant, ignorant, ill-trained, ill-considered, and offensive, frankly.
Paul Saladino himself, you know, I'm not trying to pick on him. I don't want to make it personal, but
he's not even a carnivore, and you should pick on him because he's a fucking imbecile.
He's, been public about some of this stuff, so I think it's fair to point out, to just repeat what he himself has said, but his LDL cholesterol...
It's still not cholesterol, you ignorant, arrogant, silly boy.
...is 533 mg per deciliter.
So what?
And his LDL particle count is also absolutely through the roof.
Through the roof is not a scientific description, nor terminology. It's a value judgment statement, it's an opinion, and it's an arrogant, ignorant, ill-trained, and ill-conceived opinion. It's full of shit. Just like you, Stephan, clearly. You paragon of masculinity, you, obviously.
And so not everyone responds like that. Like if you look at the survey data, I think there was a mean increase of like 30 mg per deciliter in LDL, 30 or 40, something like that. So I think it depends on the individual. I think some people, like Sean Baker's lipids are fine. He's another carnivore diet guy.
Everybody's lipids are fine, except for those around about 1 in 1 million in the population who have a complete genetic knockout of the LDL receptor. And those people generally die very young, generally of heart disease. And the reason for that is because the LDL, which is required to repair the endothelial cells, does not get delivered there because of the knockout of the receptor. Ergo, the cells break down very quickly. Atherogenesis occurs very quickly because, in fact, of a complete lack of cholesterol. Anyway, what's next?
Last time I saw, his lipids looked just fine. So I think it depends on the
According to whom, on the basis of what?
individual. But some people do experience a large increase in LDL cholesterol.
So what?
And I mean, you know more about this than I do, but that's certainly...
Goodness gracious. No, he doesn't, Stephan. Peter Attia knows absolutely dick about fuck as regards heart disease. This he has shown time and again with his various public commentaries on the subject. They are erroneous from top to bottom.
He raises red flags for me in terms of...
Again, a red flag is not a scientific term. It's a value judgment statement, and it's one of those opinions.
Cardiovascular risk over...
No, risk is the word you just used. There are no studies that can inform us on any individual person's risk of anything as that relates to any of the lipids under any circumstances whatsoever. Risk is a cause and effect inference, necessarily. Okay? Sorry about that. Not sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
The long run.
No, long run, again, the long run requires a controlled observation in people in a laboratory lock-in situation over the long run. None exist. Still.
Yeah, the thing I've never understood is
anything about heart disease, Peter Attia, at all, in fact. You have not the first fucking clue of what you're talking about in this field, and you should remain silent about this for all time, clearly.
And this is probably true of not just carnivore, but ketogenic or anything that that does produce that hyperbeta lipoproteinemia. It almost seems to be worn by some as a badge of honor, as opposed to saying, well, maybe this diet is doing a lot of really good things for me. It's improving my insulin sensitivity.
That's also a construct, you ignorant boy. Give me the name, please, Peter, of a manufacturer from whom you can purchase an insulin resistance meter. You can't, because it is a constructed variable. It's not a physiological response. It's not a physiological signal that can be measured. It's clear that you have absolutely no understanding whatever in this field. And it's really time for you to remain silent in this field. Well past time, in fact, Peter.
Feel better. I have fewer energy swings. But this one thing isn't so good. But here's
a number, a blood lipid number, which you, Peter, have decided in your infinite lack of wisdom, knowledge, and appropriate levels of understanding of your own place in the universe here, is problematic. When, sunshine, no, it isn't. There is absolutely no reason for alarm or concern on the basis of a blood lipid panel result under any circumstances, unless you're one of those 1 in a million folks. And that would have been identified very early in life. And also you probably would have died very early in life for the same reason. So this is just ridiculous, is what I'm saying. Utterly ridiculous, vacuous, nonsensical, erroneous disinformation from a couple of complete buffheads.
The thing of all the things that could go wrong, that's about the most treatable one out there.
Treatable? What are you saying, Peter? That your genes, the absolute peak of the evolutionary process to this point, somehow have this so badly wrong that a drug, which was invented, I think, less than 100 years ago, is required. The lunacy, the arrogance, and the stunning ignorance of that statement is beyond belief. Wow.
It's very easy to treat elevated ApoB.
It does not require treatment. There is no indication for treatment, none at all.
And so that's the part. I mean, and this is what we do clinically, right? This is how we treat patients, right? We have patients.
Well, you're mandated as a allopathic physician to toe their line, to espouse their ridiculous, ignorant opinion, bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical companies, by the way. Otherwise, you get struck off the medical register. Doctors are not allowed to think or to act independently in the best interests of their patient. They are required to prescribe this contraindicated metabolic poison that has no indication of any kind for the health or longevity of humans under any circumstances.
Who only get better on very, very carbohydrate restricted diets.
Better in what regard, Peter? What do we mean by better?
But then, if they develop that pattern, that elevated LDL pattern,
then their genes have set that pattern in play because that is the most propitious thing to do at that time for the best outcomes possible for that person.
A choice to make, which is we abandon the diet or we treat the elevated ApoB.
Or we abandon taking advice from imbeciles like Peter Attia, from arrogant, ignorant imbeciles like this clown and his little mate. That's what we do. We abandon taking your advice. We stop listening to you because you are a fucking imbecile. Right there. With no idea at all of cardiovascular pathophysiology, clearly.
And that's not a failure. That's simply using modern medicine to help us achieve the best of both worlds.
Well, no, it's no such thing, in fact, at all. Modern medicine has a lot to answer for, in fact, Peter. A lot to answer for. Sure, it's done some great things. The lipid hypothesis is not one of them because it's false.
So, I think I've always struggled to understand
anything at all about cardiovascular pathophysiology, clearly. We get that, Peter. We understand that you don't understand at all.
Why a person will go on that diet, have, an ApoB or LDL go from the 50th percentile to north of the 99th percentile.
And so fucking what?
And instead of being curious about what the implication is.
So who's to say that being normal or within the normal range or in the middle of the normal range for any physiological outcome variable is optimal, Peter? Where did you get that from? On what logic exactly is that based? Other than none at all. No logic of any kind. I wish Peter made it more difficult for me to point to how destitute this boy is in terms of his comprehension of the subject matter that he's grappling with here. I wish he made this a challenge for me, or anybody could make this a challenge for me. I'm yet to come across an individual who can remotely foot it with me in this field. And Peter Attia falls a long, long way short of being in the same ballpark. Nothing but the mindless repetition, the regurgitation of a fallacious theology, a bought and paid for theology, no science, no logic, no reasonable evidence of any comprehension of the actual physiological process of atherosclerosis heart disease whatsoever. Completely out of his depth, this boy.
Sort of dig their heels in and say, clearly this is a good thing, and LDL does not cause heart disease.
It does not. Fact. There we go. Simple. LDL does not cause heart disease, Peter Attia. There is absolutely no proof extant anywhere in the world that can prove otherwise. Good luck trying to find it. In fact, Peter, if you think you can find it, and I bet you probably think you can, and I probably think I know exactly which papers you'll come back with. Come back to me with those papers, sunshine, and let's have a face-to-face debate on camera about your little studies that you think proves your point. And once again, I will tear strips off you, publicly embarrass you, and make an absolute fool of you. Well, you'll make a fool of yourself, in fact. I need do nothing but point to the facts as regards what is the facts here. And the facts are LDL does not cause heart disease. Period.
I absolutely agree. I mean, it's...
Well, then you're absolutely a fucking imbecile as well, aren't you? That's a shame for you.
It's a dietary ideology. It's an ideology.
Oh, fuck. There you go, boys and girls, kiddies of all ages. It's us that's suffering from ideological delusion, not these guys who have just proven absolutely that that's what they are, in fact, doing. The projection is stunning, isn't it? What else have you got for us?
Ideology that has emerged to defend a certain type of dietary pattern. These kind of ideas emerged from the low-carb community essentially to defend against the idea that there might be some downside to certain types of low-carb diets. And they've been taken to an extreme, I think, in the carnivore community because...
Okay, so yet more opinions, yet more ill-educated, arrogant, ignorant opinions from a cock monkey. Got any science for us, Stephan? Any at all? Or Peter? Any science? Still waiting for some science.
That's a particularly potent stimulus for increasing LDL. So
fucking what? Still.
People don't want to believe that there's a downside to the thing they're doing.
Well, in the case of the carnivore diet, there isn't one. It's the species-appropriate, species-specific diet for a human being. So there are no downsides. And if all you can point to is a bought and paid for theology about lipids, a false theology about lipids, then you've failed, kiddies, haven't you? You have failed in the most destitute, abysmal fashion possible. It's beyond laughable.
And, you know, like, I kind of get it. Like,
no, you don't, Stephan. You don't get dick about fuck, clearly.
People go on this diet, they lose weight, they feel better. Some people, you know, they say their skin cleared up.
Jesus, all of that sounds terrible, doesn't it?
Or XYZ condition improved. Like,
God, goodness me, their affect improved because it is the appropriate diet for a human being. That's dreadful, Stephan. We can't be having that because some lab number goes off according to a bought and paid for theology, bought and paid for by an industry that makes the drug that affects that thing in what actually turns out to be a negative way, because it's a dangerous metabolic poison that's absolutely contraindicated. Okay, what else have you got?
There's all these tangible things they can see.
Like what? That
are getting better. They don't want to believe that there's an intangible thing that's actually putting them at severe risk.
No. There are still no studies that can inform any given living human being on their risk of anything as that relates to any aspect of nutrition of any kind over any period of time at all, Stephan. Still false. Again, absolutely false.
Because, I mean, as you know,
go on.
I say severe risk. I just mean cardiovascular disease is a big risk.
Well, no, it isn't on the carnivore diet. And no, it isn't anything that's to do with cholesterol, because cholesterol does not cause heart disease, Stephan, still.
Generally, like, as you know,
As you know,
This is the number one killer.
yes. And what is the incidence of deaths due to cardiovascular disease in a carnivore population who have eaten a carnivore diet their entire lives versus any other faction of dieters anywhere in the world? Oh, whoops, there's no data on that extent anywhere. So it's speculation, opinion, guesswork, arrogant, ignorant cock-splattery from some dumb fucks of the highest order. Right, what's next?
Cardiovascular disease is a huge, big deal.
Yes, it is. That's correct. But so what? That's got nothing to do with people eating a carnivore diet.
Even if it doesn't kill you, it can do really bad things.
Yes, that's also true, but it's still nothing to do with the carnivore diet.
You physically and cognitively. So, like,
Cognitively, you say? Jesus. Okay.
it's not a risk you want to be ignoring. So I absolutely agree. I think
Of course, you should not ignore heart disease, but what you should do is educate yourself appropriately as to the causes of heart disease. And the way to do that is not to listen to Stephan here or Peter Attia or any of these other absolute cunt muffins who are putting forward this ridiculous, false theology, the lipid hypothesis. It is demonstrably, easily refuted, very easily, in fact. So again, Stephan, if Peter lacks the set to come and debate me on it, perhaps you'd like to. And I can dismiss it within seconds, cause and effect, irrefutably, demonstrably. You won't last 5 minutes with me, sunshine. We'll be done. Okay, there's a challenge for you. What's next?
I think it's an irrational part of dietary tribal ideology that is...
Okay, so these are just words that Stephan wants to say to support his irrational theology. The projection is absolutely stunning, as is the utter lack of self-awareness of these absolute cunts, isn't it? Both of you. Absolutely substandard behavior, subhuman behavior. Ridiculous, nonsensical disinformation from you.
holding people back from experiencing their best health. And it's so treatable. I said that in the review.
My word. Irrational theology is the word of the day, kiddies. Irrational theology.
Too. I was like, you don't even have to stop the diet. You can just get it treated.
You don't need to treat your lipids, dickhead.
Or you could modify the diet.
Yeah.
You don't need to do either of those things, in fact.
And by the way, it's you see the same sort of equally stubborn ideology at the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
Again, with the projection there, Peter. Stubborn ideology, irrational theology, anti-scientific behavior from someone who purports to be a scientist. Someone with an immense publication record, Peter. Simply nowhere near good enough, son. Absolutely unacceptable behavior. Criminal behavior.
Where we see these patients that'll go on these incredibly restrictive plant-based diets, and it's usually some combination of micronutrient deficiency and or protein deficiency that's going to be the death of them. But there's no deviating from it. There's no, like, I'm going to supplement with protein shakes, I'm going to take beef.
The difference, though, Peter, is in terms of the different, what you will call theological factions on human diet. The vegans are wrong about what the species-appropriate, species-specific diet is. Their theology is absolutely, demonstrably, clearly fallacious. The theology, as you would call it, of the carnivore sect is demonstrably, clearly, absolutely optimal and correct. Prove me wrong. Making ridiculous, farcical, false statements about lipids on the basis of bought and paid for theology will not do it. Show me negative outcomes and show me that they are overrepresented in a carnivore community of folks who have eaten nothing but carnivore diet their entire lives. Shall we wait for that? Back to the theology. What else have you got?
B vitamins, I'm going to do these other, and again, it's the same sort of thing. It's like somehow if I acknowledge the fact that I need to supplement with these other things to work around a diet that I otherwise like, or that is congruent with a belief system I have around the treatment of animals, which I can respect that, right? If that's your belief system, then by all means be true to it. But
by all means kill yourself via malnutrition because you have a belief structure around whether it's right or wrong to predate on other animals. Absolutely. But don't run around and tell people that it's a good diet, a healthful diet, and one they should follow too, because that is disinformation. It's false. It's demonstrably false. It's clearly false.
But yes, I find it somewhat self-destructive.
Yes, the vegan diet is self-destructive. That is clear and demonstrable. 84% quit rate within 5 years, and 90% of those people citing catastrophic health failure as their reason for quitting. Good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very analogous to what we see in certain corners of the vegan diet community. They want it to be best for everything. It's got to be best for the environment and for...
It isn't.
Ethics and...
It isn't.
For health.
It isn't. Any of those things.
And, it's just very hard to swallow that there might be some downsides. And
well, sure. But you haven't shown any downsides to the carnivore diet at all. You've given us your opinion about a bought and paid for theology regarding lipids, which is false.
For the carnivore diet, too, you see, they try to justify the environmental aspects of it, too.
Some of them do. But let's be realistic here, folks, shall we? You cannot exist on this planet without having an impact on the environment of some kind. And farming, beef farming, for example, does have its negative effects on the environment if it is not done correctly, just like anything. However, properly sustainable, properly environmentally aware farming is possible. And it should be the standard in my mind, but that's for another day. I myself am a farmer, among other things, and we do just that here on our farm. We are sustainable, environmentally responsible. Our impact is entirely positive, in fact, on the land that we are currently guardians of, by way of ownership of it. Again, that's for another day.
In the carnivore code, he talks a lot about regenerative agriculture, which is a concept that I think is interesting, and I think I support it, but it's a certain, I would say, spin on it that makes it seem particularly favorable, and also there's an underlying assumption that the average carnivore is going to eat nothing but regenerative agriculture beef, which I think is not the case.
So waffle, mindless opinions, theological, irrational standpoints, projection, pseudo-intelligentsia. These two are as dumb as a box of rocks, boys and girls. Stupid as fuck, both of them. Low IQ, it would seem, both of them. Prove me wrong. Come and debate me on lipids and heart disease. I dare you. See if you last more than 5 minutes.
Yes.
Right, so there you go, kitty witties. Absolute pustulous, excremental garbage from start to finish. Not a single point that was valid, worthwhile, or anything that you should have wasted your time on if you watched that independently without my input, I guess, my response to it. Hope it's been both educational and at least somewhat amusing in places. I do try to keep it light while ever pretending to be the grumpy professor as fuck. If you didn't like it, piss off. Who cares? That's not my problem. I'm here to talk to the people who get it. So I'm kind of singing to the choir, I know. But anyway, that's how it is. And you can join me next time when someone else will be wrong on the interwebs, because there really is a lot of it going around, isn't there? Yep. All right. See you then. Ciao for now.